Good afternoon. Welcome to 90 Stories for 90 Years. In celebration of Fraternity and Sorority Life being on DePaul's campus for 90 years, we are interviewing faculty, staff, students, and alumni about their experience with DePaul Fraternity and Sorority Life. And I am so excited to have Peggy Burke joining us today. So Peggy, I want to just go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Terrific. Thank you, Natalie. First, let me congratulate the FSL community on 90 years. That is pretty amazing and probably one of the longest student organization communities at DePaul. As Natalie mentioned, my name is Peggy Burke. My main name is Clark. So I went to DePaul as Peggy Clark from 1979 to 1983, was an undergraduate, secondary ed major, and was a very active student leader on campus, but was not involved in the FSL community. That came later. After finishing up my undergraduate degree, I went for a graduate degree at DePaul in history. My intent was to become a high school history teacher. And then I ended up landing a job at DePaul as an entry-level position, working in the Student Affairs Division. So my first job was working with our international students, students with disabilities, and running the new student orientation program. I never had any intention for staying at DePaul, but I stayed there for 34 years. I moved up in student affairs, moved into being the director of student life, which was the first time I was working with the overseeing the FSL community, and then I became an associate vice president for student affairs. And I retired from DePaul in 2018, but still remain as much in contact as I can.
And you just told me that you are still a student, right?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I'm back to being a student.
You're back at DePaul.
Exactly. I am pursuing a certificate, a master's degree or master's certificate in graduate certificate in teaching English as a second language. And that's my next career after leaving student affairs. I want to go and figure out how to teach individuals who want to learn the English language. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
That's awesome. So you spent a good amount of your life at DePaul. So what does it mean to be a Blue Demon?
So Natalie, when I add everything up, it's 39 years. And that is the majority of my life. And so for the majority of my life, I have been a Blue Demon. And it has been a source of pride for me, a sense of joy. I loved my DePaul experience, both as an undergraduate and a graduate, and working at DePaul. I loved the people. I loved the students. I loved the mission. And so what it means to me at this point in my life is that DePaul did amazing things for me, and that I need to give back. So I'm searching for ways that I can be of service to others, and that all comes back to the DePaul mission.
That's awesome. So I know you mentioned that when you started working with student involvement, you started working with the FSL community. So can you talk about how you saw the Fraternity and Sorority Life community evolve during your time?
Sure. So my first connection was I was an advisor in the FSL community, and I advised Theta Phi Alpha for a number of years, and I loved that organization of women. They invited me into their community. I had no FSL experience, but they needed an advisor, and they introduced me to the culture and the nature of this wonderful organization. And then I really learned how to become a better advisor. So I really watched and watched these wonderful women grow over the years in their leadership, in their confidence, and who they wanted to be in the world. And when I became director of student life, then I was managing the Office of Student Life that included the FSL community. And during that time, and that would have been from 1989 to 1999, I really saw the whole community grow. So there's a number of key areas that happened while I was overseeing the FSL community. One, we that was the shift. It was during that period, the shift from local FSL organizations to national organizations. And that was a huge, very difficult decision, because we knew DePaul's history had always been connected to both local and national organizations. And the local FSL organizations were very strong, but it was getting to the point that it was more difficult to manage, and we wanted to professionalize the area, and we wanted to grow the area, and we couldn't do that under the current the structure as it was. So we made the decision to only have national fraternity and sorority organizations on campus, working with those national offices, working with their professional staff, being in partnership with the organization, the university, and the students to make sure that we had excellent, thriving, quality student organizations. And although that was a big shift, it was an important one. And the second big shift was this was the period where we started multicultural FSL organizations.
Okay.
So for the first time, students of color had organizations that spoke to them and their culture and their identities. And we just started very small and looking at organizations that would really benefit our students. And we kind of started in that period, and that just has continued to grow. So during the time that I was overseeing the FSL community, I have to say there's a real sense of pride for me watching that organization grow and blossom. They just were amazing student organizations who produced amazing students.
Yeah, and it's been like so cool in my like 5.5 years to see how much the FSL community like has like grown. I think especially when you talk about the cultural fraternity and sorority expansion, because we just added NPHC for our Black Greek letter organizations. And that's, I think, really exciting, because giving a space and a voice to those students who have wanted that for a really long time. And so it's kind of cool to see how that has been a continuous like thread throughout the history of FSL at DePaul.
Absolutely. Being open to it, taking a risk. We were one of a very early on Catholic universities that opened their FSL community up to multicultural student Greek organizations. So I was very proud of that, and it just makes me beam when I hear that it's continuing to grow.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about being a chapter advisor to Theta Phi Alpha. So what were some of your favorite memories or parts about being an advisor?
In the beginning, just wonderful memories of the students in kind of inducting me or initiating me into the organization. I'm like, really? I mean, I can serve as a organization advisor. I know how important it is to be initiated into the organization. Well, they had me in their ceremony, and that I was very touched and very proud of Theta Phi Alpha and being able to contribute. And then getting to know all these women and being at their various events, whether it was their teas or their orientation activities, seeing them at the organization fair, seeing them drop into my office, just mentoring them as much as they were mentoring me in the organization. And to this day, I can think of countless amazing women that came out of Theta Phi Alpha during that era that I got to work with, and it really blessed my life. And the role of an advisor is such a unique one. I was pretty lucky to have such a great student organization to be a part of.
Yeah, and I think the part that you mentioned about how much they also gave to you, I think that's like one of the most rewarding parts of being an advisor, because I remember when I was the advisor for the Panhellenic Council and how much they were trying to do to like empower women. I think that like gave so much to me, just to see their persistence and them standing up for each other and holding their community accountable. I think they give you also so much as an advisor too.
Absolutely. And, in my heart, I'm an educator, and I love to watch students grow and blossom into their into who they want to be and who they can be. And an advisor, you get to be there and to help them kind of guide them along the way. And in fact, I've heard from a number of former FSL students that I worked and advised with in the 1990s, and they said the nicest things about my guidance and my mentoring, which I didn't even realize, but I said, if you only knew what you did for me,
Mhm.
they just made my job a joy. You know,
Mhm.
yes, you work in student affairs and you have to deal with policies and procedures
Mhm.
and holding people accountable, but in the end, you get to work with students and really watching them grow into these wonderful human beings.
So you've seen a lot of FSL events during your time. So what are some of your favorites? You can have more than one or a couple.
So I want to touch on let's on a couple. One,
Okay.
so as both an undergraduate and then my early days at working at DePaul, you were going to hear when you talk to alums at DePaul is that we never had houses for
Mhm.
our FFL community, so they had tables in the cafeteria. So they were always lined up in the back of the cafeteria, and they had these kind of boxes that look like small houses, and they had their letters on them. And so at lunch, every member of the FSL community would have lunch with their brothers or sisters in the cafeteria at their table. And and you'd look over and you would see that whole area just alive with activity,
Mhm.
and pride, and kind of intermixing with the different groups, and it was their area. You just knew, um, that you weren't a part of that, and it would just seem like a really neat organization to be a part
Mhm.
of. So I always loved those houses, and even when it kind of made me sad. You know, cafeterias change and students change, and so they
Right.
don't have the houses anymore. And I'm like, ugh, I love those.
So maybe
The
we'll
other,
come back.
exactly. Um, the second piece is in terms of events. Let me just talk about the FSL community in general.
Mhm.
They were present at everything. The organization fair, they were there. Fest, they were there. Just any kind of big event at DePaul, FSL was widely represented.
Mhm.
And the third piece is whenever I, as a student affairs administrator, needed student leaders to show up, guess who showed up?
FSL.
It was FSL. It was the fraternity and sorority members.
Mhm.
Whether it was a new president's or inauguration, whether it was a dinner with the board of trustees, whether it was a new student orientation program, whether it was
Mhm.
visitors from other institutions, um, uh, the students, they just, Peggy, what do you need? We'll be there. We'll be, and not only will I be there, but my brothers will be there. Not
Mhm.
only will I be there, but my sisters will be there. And then they would just take over. They would work the room, meeting everybody. They just had a sense of pride in DePaul and
Mhm.
confidence of being able to introduce themselves, their organizations, DePaul, and representing DePaul at its very best. So when I think of what I thoroughly enjoy about working with FSL students were events like that,
Mhm.
where I it wasn't always easy to get other students to do what the FSL community could do.
Yeah, I feel like FSL students are involved in a lot of different areas at DePaul, and that's what I think I've always appreciated is they are part of Fraternity and Sorority Life, but they're also an orientation leader, or they are in FSL but also work at the Ray. And so I think when you're talking about like they will jump on any opportunity because I think they just want to spread like DePaul pride, and they're so excited about their membership and being part of the FSL community. Like they just want to figure out how to get others invested and tell their story too.
And they do it so well. And
Mhm.
it was just so natural. And to hear, Natalie, that you can still say that today, and I could say that 25, 30 years ago, they were the
Mhm.
students that showed up, and um, and they still do.
Yes.
And you know, it was during the Blue Demon Challenge. I was watching all of these former FSL members from
Mhm.
DePaul from 20 years ago just stepping up to the plate,
Yeah.
and I just I knew that was because they were FSL members that they were so committed.
Mhm. Yeah, and they're all coming back and doing these interviews with us. And so I think that's like been like the best piece is like they still want to share their story too, even after they graduate from DePaul. And like they are still involved. We've seen a lot of students who graduate that end up coming back and being chapter advisors, or they figure out it's another way to volunteer through different programs and recruitment. So I think that's the cool part of FSL. It's like this connection remains even after graduation.
Exactly. And what's really fun, Natalie, is I used to see these FSL students that I worked with who then came back with their sons and daughters who were freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
It was phenomenal. That really said a lot. They loved their DePaul experience and they wanted to see their children have it.
So what is your best advice for someone who is interested in joining a fraternity or sorority?
It's an important decision. And how I approach that is how I approached anybody that was looking at a college or university. They were high school seniors or high school juniors and thinking, what school should I go to? And to me, it's all about, where do you feel that you fit? What speaks to you? When you step foot on a campus, what does it resonate with you? Do you feel comfortable? Do you see yourself in that organization? For students who are thinking about joining a fraternity or sorority, the same thing. Checking out the community, speaking with the members of those communities and those organizations, coming to their events, meeting people. What resonates with you? Do you feel like this is an organization I want to be a part of? I want to be there. Or does this not quite fit and I want to do something different? I think that's just an important decision. So I call it discernment. I call it just thinking through and what you want. What do you want and where do you feel comfortable? And my guess is if you're interested in a fraternity or sorority, you're going to find one that resonates with you. And making sure you choose an organization that resonates with your values. Do the individuals make you feel welcome, making you feel like you're a part of this larger organization? So all of those things you should really think about instead of just jumping in or saying, I'm not going to have anything to do with it without giving it a chance.
Yeah, I think those are some really good points. And we have 29 organizations. And so the students have a lot of different options to choose from. And so taking that time, as you said, like to see which organizations align with your values and, who do you want to spend a lot of your time with at DePaul, because you're going to spend a lot of time and like, that's how you're going to get a lot out of your fraternity or sorority life experience. So figuring out where do you want to spend a lot of time at DePaul too.
Yes. And, and what draws you, what speaks to you, where do you feel drawn? Like, I want to be a part of this, are all really important things to think about when you're thinking about joining an organization.
So our closing question is, what is one piece of advice you have for students?
So fraternity and sorority life make DePaul a better place. I saw it in the 34 years I worked at DePaul, certainly the time that I was at DePaul. Those students are probably some of the sharpest students that I ever worked with. So I would tell students, don't take that lightly, that the university needs you and your leadership. It needs your involvement. It needs your commitment to the community. And to step up to that responsibility. Natalie and I were just talking before this interview, the fall is going to be a very interesting time for students to come back to DePaul. I think the FSL community could do a lot to help students make that bridge, whether they're current freshmen who haven't had the on-campus experience yet, new freshmen coming in, new transfer students, whatever it is. I would encourage our current students to roll up your sleeves and give back to DePaul and make it the vibrant community that we all know it can be. FSL can be a leader in that.
Yeah, and that's such an excellent point, because I've seen how FSL has persisted during this pandemic, and they are still welcoming students into their organizations and hosting events. And I think there's such a vital piece in this transition back to an on-campus environment and helping students navigate that. I know we were talking about we're going to be welcoming almost 2 new freshman classes. And so FSL has the opportunity to create that sense of belonging and help with that transition and help students figure out this on-campus experience when they return in the fall.
Yes, I will totally not surprise me at all that FSL are leaders in that process. I can see them just waiting at the door.
Yes.
So I highly encourage that, and the university really needs you and your leadership.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Peggy, for joining us this afternoon. We so appreciate it.
Well, and Natalie, it's my pleasure. And thank you for all your excellent work that you've done for FSL over your 5.5 years. So thanks, Natalie.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.